Welcome to the Short Tale Theater. Today we are going to narrate 3 true scary stories as they have been shared by Reddit users. If you like content like this, please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and leave a comment on the section below. It really motivates us to create videos like this daily. Story number 1, The White Lady Encounter. It was a chilly autumn evening in Romania, the kind where the air cuts sharp against your skin, and every sound carries farther in the stillness. My friends and I were deep in the woods playing hide and seek, a tradition we'd kept alive since we were kids. The forest was dense, its towering trees casting shadows under the faint light of the moon. That night, something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but the woods seemed different. The usual rustling of leaves and distant chirps of crickets had fallen eerily silent. Still, I shrugged it off and focused on the game. I'd found a great hiding spot behind an ancient oak tree, with roots so thick they formed a hollow. As I crouched there, my friends' voices grew faint, their laughter and footsteps fading deeper into the woods. The quiet was unnerving, and soon all I could hear was my own breathing. That's when I heard it. At first, it was subtle, a rustling sound, like leaves shifting underfoot. I froze, thinking one of my friends was nearby, but the sound was too slow, too deliberate. My heart started pounding as I peeked around the tree. That's when I saw her. She was standing about 20 feet away, partially hidden by the shadows of the trees. For a split second, I thought it was a prank. Maybe one of my friends trying to scare me. But as I looked closer, I realized this was no prank. The woman was completely still, wearing a long, flowing white gown that seemed to shimmer faintly in the moonlight. Her hair spilled over her shoulders like a silver curtain, and her pale skin almost glowed in the darkness. But it was her face that truly terrified me. Her eyes were hollow, empty, yet piercing. It felt like she wasn't just looking at me, she was looking through me. A cold wave swept over me and I couldn't move. My body was frozen, every instinct screaming at me to run, but I just stood there, rooted to the ground. Then she moved. It wasn't a natural movement. She tilted her head slowly to the side as if studying me, her movements unnervingly smooth. My breath hitched in my throat. She didn't walk toward me. Instead, she stepped backward, fading into the shadows. And just like that, she was gone. I don't know how long I stood there, paralyzed by fear. When I finally broke free from whatever force was holding me, I ran. I ran as fast as I could, branches tearing at my clothes, the cold air burning my lungs. My friends were waiting at the edge of the forest, laughing and teasing me when I stumbled out, breathless and pale. "Did you see a ghost?" one of them joked. I tried to explain what I had seen, but they didn't believe me. They thought I was making it up, letting my imagination run wild. But I knew what I had seen. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, her empty eyes staring back at me. The next day, despite my fear, I went back to the spot where I'd seen her. I needed to prove to myself that I wasn't crazy. That's when I noticed something strange, a long, jagged scratch running down my forearm. I didn't remember getting it, but it was there, raw and red. Determined to find answers, I borrowed a camera and set it up in the same spot that evening. I let it record overnight, praying it would catch something, anything. The next morning, I reviewed the footage, my hands shaking as I hit play. At first, it showed nothing, just the stillness of the forest, the faint rustling of leaves in the wind. But then, at exactly 3 a.m., she appeared. The woman in white was standing in the exact same spot where I'd seen her, her figure partially obscured by the trees. She didn't move, just stood there, staring directly into the camera. My chest tightened as I watched her on the screen. And then she tilted her head. It was the same slow, deliberate motion I'd seen the night before, but this time, something changed. Her face, it wasn't the same. It was twisted, distorted, her mouth stretched into an unnatural grin. Her eyes, once hollow, now glowed faintly, like embers in the dark. And then, just as suddenly as she had appeared, she vanished. I never went back to those woods again. Even now, years later, I can't escape the memory of her. Her image is burned into my mind, and sometimes, in the dead of night, I feel like she's still watching me. Who or what she was, I'll never know, but one thing is certain, she wasn't human. Story number 2, the shadow in the campsite. Camping had always been my escape. There's something comforting about being surrounded by nothing but the wilderness, miles away from the chaos of everyday life. That's why my friend Kevin and I decided to spend a weekend deep in the woods. We found a secluded spot miles from the nearest trail, nestled beside a small clearing. The trees around us stood like silent sentinels, their leaves whispering softly in the evening breeze. It was perfect. The first night passed uneventfully. We built a fire, cooked some canned chili, and swapped stories until the fire burned down to embers. I remember lying in my sleeping bag, staring up at the stars through the canopy, feeling at peace. But that peace didn't last. The second night, everything changed. It started as a normal evening. We had just finished dinner and were sitting around the campfire, laughing about some dumb prank Kevin had pulled back in college. That's when I noticed it. The forest around us had gone completely silent. No crickets, no rustling leaves, nothing. "Do you hear that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Kevin frowned, looking around. "Hear what?" The stillness was unnerving. The air felt heavy, like the forest itself was holding its breath. We shrugged it off, convincing ourselves it was nothing. Maybe a predator was nearby, and the smaller animals had gone quiet. It happens, right? An hour later, we decided to turn in for the night. Kevin climbed into his tent, and I stayed by the fire a little longer, staring into the flames. I've always found fire hypnotic, the way it dances, the way it seems alive. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. At first, I thought it was Kevin stepping out of his tent, but when I turned to look, the tent flap was still zipped shut. The movement had come from the trees. My pulse quickened as I scanned the darkness, my eyes straining to make out anything beyond the dim glow of the firelight. That's when I saw it. It was a shadow, darker than the night around it, moving between the trees. It was tall, taller than any person I'd ever seen, and it moved unnaturally, almost gliding. My breath caught in my throat. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, that the flickering firelight was playing tricks on me. But then it stopped. The shadow lingered at the edge of the clearing, just beyond the reach of the firelight. I couldn't see any features, but I could feel it watching me. My skin prickled, and a wave of cold fear washed over me. I called out, "Kevin?" hoping he'd wake up and come outside, but there was no response. The shadow began to move again, circling the campsite. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I grabbed the closest thing I could find, a metal camping mug, and clutched it like a weapon, knowing full well it was useless. And then it stopped again. This time it was closer, right at the edge of the firelight. I could see the outline of its form now, tall and angular, with limbs that seemed too long, too thin. It didn't move, didn't make a sound. I wanted to scream, to wake Kevin, but I was frozen, paralyzed by fear. The shadow just stood there, as if taunting me, daring me to make the first move. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it melted back into the darkness. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the fire, clutching that stupid camping mug, my eyes darting to every shadow, every flicker of movement. When morning finally came, I woke Kevin and told him everything. He laughed at me, said I was overtired, that my imagination had run wild, but I knew what I had seen. As we packed up to leave, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. And when we finally hiked back to the car, I glanced back one last time. There, at the edge of the trail, was a shadow. It wasn't moving this time, just standing, watching. I didn't say anything to Kevin. What was the point? But to this day, I can still feel its eyes on me, even though I never saw its face. I'll never camp in those woods again. Whatever was out there that night, it wasn't human. Story number 3, The Vanishing Woodsman. The woods behind my grandparents' house were like a second home to me growing up. They were vast and wild, filled with twisting trails, hidden clearings, and stories my grandfather used to tell about the old days. He always said the woods had a life of their own, like they were watching, listening. I thought he was just trying to spook me as a kid. I hadn't been back in years, but last fall, something called me there. Maybe it was nostalgia, or maybe it was that restless feeling I'd been trying to shake. Whatever it was, I found myself packing a bag, throwing on my old hiking boots, and heading into the forest alone. The first few hours were peaceful. The trees were alive with the colors of autumn, gold, crimson, and fiery orange. The air was crisp, and the familiar smell of damp earth brought a wave of memories rushing back. It felt good to be back, like reconnecting with an old friend. But as the sun dipped lower in the sky, the forest began to change. The warm glow of daylight faded, replaced by long shadows that stretched across the ground. The air grew colder, and an unsettling stillness crept in. I brushed it off as my imagination. That's when I saw him. He was standing in the distance, just off the trail, his back to me. At first, I thought it was another hiker, a strange coincidence in a place that rarely saw visitors. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a dark coat and a wide-brimmed hat that shaded his face. Something about him felt off, though. I called out, "Hey, everything okay?" He didn't respond. He didn't even flinch, like he hadn't heard me. He just stood there, perfectly still, staring into the trees ahead of him. A chill ran down my spine, but I told myself he was probably just deep in thought. I walked a little closer, trying to get a better look. That's when he turned. His movement was sudden, almost mechanical, like he wasn't turning to look at me, but rather reacting to some unseen signal. I froze as his face came into view, or I should say the lack of a face. Where there should have been eyes, a nose, a mouth, there was nothing, just smooth, pale skin, like a mannequin's. My breath caught in my throat and my legs felt rooted to the ground. He tilted his head slightly, as if studying me, though I couldn't tell how. I don't know how long we stood there, locked in that silent standoff. Then, without warning, he turned back around and walked deeper into the woods. His movements were unnaturally smooth, his footsteps eerily silent. I don't know what possessed me to follow him, but I did. Maybe I wanted answers, or maybe I just couldn't believe what I'd seen. Either way, I found myself trailing him at a distance, my heart pounding in my chest. The deeper we went, the darker the forest became. The trees seemed to close in around me, their branches clawing at the sky like skeletal hands. My flashlight barely pierced the gloom, and every shadow seemed to shift and writhe at the edges of my vision. And then he stopped. We had reached a small clearing I didn't recognize, even after all my years exploring these woods. In the center was an old, crumbling stone well, overgrown with moss and ivy. The woodsman stood beside it, his head bowed, as if in silent prayer. I stayed hidden behind a tree, watching him. My heart was pounding so loudly, I was sure he could hear it. Then he turned again, but this time he was looking directly at me. Even though he had no eyes, I could feel his gaze boring into me, cold and relentless. I stumbled back, my flashlight slipping from my hand. It hit the ground and flickered out, plunging the clearing into darkness. I scrambled to pick it up, and when I finally managed to turn it back on, he was gone. The clearing was empty, no woodsman, no sound, just the ancient well and the oppressive silence pressing down on me. I didn't wait around to find out more. I ran faster than I ever had in my life, branches tearing at my clothes and face as I tore through the underbrush. When I finally burst out of the woods and into my grandparents' backyard, I collapsed, gasping for air. I don't know what I saw that day, but I've never gone back into those woods. My grandfather's stories suddenly feel less like old folklore and more like a warning I failed to heed. To this day, I dream about that clearing, that well, and the faceless man standing beside it. I wake up drenched in sweat, his featureless face burned into my memory. Whatever he wasn't human,